You got to make your people feel like that they're making a top quality product and that they're at the very top of the game.
Hi, I'm Tim Ditloff with Full Sail Leadership, and welcome to the Quorum Leadership Podcast. Today we're with Peter Harken of Harken Sailing Equipment, a worldwide renowned sailing equipment company that really outfits Olympic boats and great yachts across the world. Peter, welcome to Quorum Leadership Podcast, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for welcoming us into your home to really learn more about you as a leader and learn about Harken and all the lessons that you've learned from a life in sailing and business. So, Peter, take us back. Take us back to the days when you and Olaf thought that making blocks and sailing equipment was a really amazing idea.
I'm not sure we thought of it as an amazing idea. We just wanted to do it. Like, I went to UW in Madison, and Olaf went to Georgia Tech, but he liked coming up here. First of all, the parties were really great at UW, and we were a couple of screw-offs. And after graduating and everything, my father actually wanted us to come back to the Philippines. That's where we were raised, and be in business with him or get in business, whatever. But we had gotten to like the upper Midwest so much, and the atmosphere and the culture here, and the high work ethic, and everything was real here. Your friends were real and so on. Nobody was pretentious. It's like at our yacht club, Pewaukee Yacht Club, or Milwaukee Yacht Club, when you're at the bar standing around with guys and stuff, you really don't know who's a millionaire and who's not. You know, who's a ditch digger or a zillionaire, whatever. Everybody is just equal with each other. And that was really a nice feeling. So we got to like the area very much, and we told my dad that we'd really like to stay and try and do something here, create it ourselves, So we did, and we were Sailing was part of it. My father was a sailor. He was Dutch from Holland, and my mother was Swedish. And we had a sailboat in the Philippines, belonged to Manila Yacht Club and so on. So we really got our taste of sailing first there. And then the University of Wisconsin had a great outdoor program. Sailing was very strong in it. And I think I spent most of my high academic career down at the sailing club and at the outing club, and got a taste for it. And it was during those years that I was Commodore of the sailing club once, but was always involved with it. And the students actually bought the boats, and we had to fix them all ourselves and so on. And it was during those years I sort of decided, God, there's got to be a better way to make some of this equipment, And I was working for a Gilson Medical Electronics on the side in their development section and so on. And the boss was a great guy, well-known guy at the medical school, Dr. Gilson, and I learned all how to run the machinery, lathes and drill presses and so on. And so I ended up making my own boats and so on. But I had to make my own equipment too, because as a student you don't have any damn money. And so I was able to make them there. And it was during those times that I had just discovered some new bearing principles and so on in the blocks that kind of started the whole thing. And a sailboat pulley goes back and forth, reacts back and forth. It doesn't constantly turn around. And being as frictionless as possible, especially when you have a whole group of them in line, is pretty important. Especially in ice boating, you need really quick reaction. And in the scow sailing, on our water sailing on boats, you need to be able to let the boom and sails out with just light wind pressure, because you don't have an engine on the boat. That's your engine. But it has to drag the line through all these pulleys. And if the pulleys has a high friction about it, or a multiple because of all the pulleys in line, you sometimes have to push on the sails and the booms to get them out, and so on. And in ice boating, if things don't happen very quickly, you're in trouble. It'd be dump over. So that was kind of the push that I was looking for. And it happened when, I kind of discovered these lightweight ball bearings, these nylon balls and so on, and employed them in the design of pulleys. And that kind of started that part of it. But we were also into building our own boats, whether it was an e-scow or ice boats or something else. So there we learned very much the trade of building boats. But that was all happen chance, it wasn't under any professionals that were showing us how to do it. And but that's kind of got us started in that we wanted to build a better university club boat, which we were sailing at the time, one that could really take the punishment.
Innovation seems to be a common theme that has run throughout your career, because I know just a while ago we were talking about the medical emergency or the fire department rescue equipment that you're now into. You have Harken Durham. So what drives the spirit of innovation within your life or Harken as a corporation?
Our business was created because of innovation in the design of blocks and pulleys and so on, to make them light but make them very efficient. So slowly they began to take over the sailing world, and we had to create the product first. Otherwise we wouldn't have been in the business, because there was a lot of companies out there from Europe and England making sailboat hardware. And so we were facing those kind of companies, but none of them had what we were really looking to try and do. So we were kind of forced into it. And the thing with the ball bearing blocks was kind of a mistake, in that I was actually designing a bearing for a medical electronic piece of equipment. And it had to, it was carrying a whole bunch of test tubes, and it had to go around underneath a pitot tube that dropped in a certain amount of acid or some other chemical in each test tube, so it would index around. But it also had to be in what they call a clean room. Couldn't have any grease or any those kind of components in there. And so it was not easy to find a bearing for this big aluminum table with all these test tubes that didn't have some kind of lubricant. And so I had to kind of discover, a new type of bearing for it. And that's when I came upon the thought of these plastic balls, these white little plastic balls that are common in our block. And was, milled in a groove and everything, and put these balls and stuff in it, and it worked pretty good. But in the meantime, I had a bunch of these balls on my workbench, and it was the same time that I was building my own equipment for sailing, and some of them dropped off onto the floor, and I noticed how high they bounced, and I said, good Lord, boy, are they light, and they really bounced high. And the one class I was pretty good at in school that I studied for was physics. So I thought, wow, lightweight, faster acceleration. And that's exactly what a sailboat pulley does, because it stops and starts. It doesn't continue. Once you got something rolling, it really doesn't matter, you know, the weight and so on. But the acceleration, you need something light for really speedy acceleration. And that's what a sailboat pulley goes in and out, stop, start, start. So acceleration is very important, and that's what kind of hit me. So that evening I went home and on a napkin drew up a bearing principle for a sailboat pulley with these balls in it. And then I went back the next day at the shop, and after work, the boss would let me work on the machinery and stuff myself, because he liked sailing himself. And made some and used them on my boats, and they worked pretty well. And my competition out there kept seeing this going on. I didn't have to push on the boom, do a thing. They saw it in the ice boats, how quick things were. And they would ask, my God, what have you got there? You know? And that's when that sort of started. So then I had to start making them for these guys too. And but I was making them all by hand, you know. And I couldn't charge them the amount of money that was taken. Then Gary Comer, that started Land's End, the big clothing and store, he then had a catalog. Oh God, what was it called again? It was the Bible of the industry in sailing and in boats. And he called us down to Chicago, where he was, and said, I want to look at these blocks. I want to see what you guys have. Why don't you come on down and we'll go out to lunch and take a look at what you got. So we did. We went down, and after a while, we went down with him literally in a cigar box, you know, the pieces. And then he looked at them for a while, and he played with them a little bit, and he said, you guys, I'm going to give you a half page in the catalog. And he said, and I said, well, wait a second, we're not in the business, Gary. We're not even ready for this. And I said, there's going to be a lot of people. Your catalog is the Bible of the industry, and we won't be able to, you know, to fulfill these orders if we get any at all or whatever. And he said, well, he said, I'm going to do it anyway. And so you guys better get going. You know, right? And we went, holy mackerel. So on the way back, we were driving back up here, we were scratching our heads and going, what have we created here? Wow. And they said, somehow we got to get into the business, you know, which fortunately we were able to do, because the small building that we were in, where we were building the boats in Waukesha, belonged to two brothers that were tool and die makers. And they made injection molds and stamping molds. And they got together with us. We heard that you guys you got a problem and so on, making these blocks, and we heard all about it. And they said, look, I tell you what, how about we make them for you? We'll do the tooling, and we'll actually assemble them for you, make them. You guys design and sell them. And it was all on a handshake. That's all it was.
Wow.
And we were with them for 40 years, you know, wow. And they kept it growing. So they really helped us get into the business and go on. Wow. And then it just started to grow, you know, not without pain, but it did. You know?
Yeah, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced over your career so far?
I guess the main challenge in every young business is you never have enough money, you know. So it's all elbows in grease at the time. And you're basically just going, not from bank to bank, but you're always going back to the bank to try and get some more money. And you're making promises to them that, hey, we've got these orders and so on, but we need cash for the labor, for supplies and so on, because we don't get paid until we deliver. And fortunately, the bank in Waukesha had this great president, Tom Prosser, who just believed in us. And he would give us $500 here, $500 there, whatever, $1,000, kind of all the time, just on a whim and a promise from us. And we would usually fulfill it, even though it took some time, and he just said, well, I believe you guys will dig ditches to pay us back. So he says, okay, we're going to do this. Wow. And it did happen that way. And he even had to go downtown to the big bank and tell them at what time what he was doing, because they were wondering. Because, we didn't have any collateral for loans or anything. And so, but it did work out. And so in that way, it kind of grew. Wow. Then the hardware business, actually the blocks, began to overtake the boat business. It wasn't until 1986 or so on that we decided, hey, we can't do both. We can't do both the boats and the hardware at the same time. It's just taking too much of our resources and so on. And we had an offer from a guy on the East Coast that would like to have the boat business, because our boats did become pretty famous out in the world. Our Olympic boats, the 470 and the Flying Dutchman, and the 420 and so on, we became kind of number one in the world on that. And he wanted to buy it, so it was an opportune time for us to do so. Yeah. And we taught him how to make the boat. We had very good boat builders with us, glass guys that were with us, and we spent 6 months teaching their guys how to do this and so on. And then we went full time into the hardware business. Wow. So that's kind of it,
Wow, great story.
But there were a lot of hurdles and everything we had to go through. Lots of driving with the boats behind us to Texas and God knows where, during the night and early morning hours and so on. So it was a long ride, but pretty good ride.
When people not in the business world see a success story, that whole notion of an overnight success, there's a lot of work before the overnight success happens. That's what I'm hearing from you.
I get a lot of questions from younger guys and everything. Well, how do you, how did you start this? How did you plan for this? And I tell them, we didn't plan. I said, it was just one foot at a time and the other foot, and things would succeed behind it. I said, we just didn't have a time for planning. There was no 3-year plan or 5-year plan or anything like that. It was just, we got to this point and we took another step forward and got to that point and so on. Basically, it was very much of that there's a need, We saw a need to take the next step, to do something. It was kind of like when we got into the big boat block business. We were all in small boats at the time. And, the guys were going to say, geez, when are you going to start making some of your hardware for the bigger boats? And how about winches and things like that? And that wasn't even in our mind at the time. But we thought, okay, well, let's take a crack at big boat blocks. And that's where we started that. Then we had to find a new plastic, too, to take the high loads that the big boat blocks took. Because the normal Delrin or nylon type plastic that we were using was okay for small boat blocks and stuff, never overloaded them. But in the big boats, the loads got so much higher, and that plastic we were using in the small boat just wasn't up to it. The balls would elongate and crush and so on. And we very fortunately found a material called Torlon that was being made down in Naperville, Chicago, and for the military. And my brother's wife's cousin or something was working down there in that same plant and told us about Torlon. And he said it's a fantastic material. He said it's quite expensive, very expensive, and it's only being used by the military right now. And but they're going to let it loose, and you guys should really take a look at this material. And he sent us some samples and so on that we could look at. And so we made balls out of them.
Wow.
And by God, they really worked, you know. And so we were able to develop the big boat blocks with this. When they released the material, we got right into our ball bearing manufacturers and had to make balls out of it.
Wow.
And we actually, and we didn't call it Torlon, we called it Duratron.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because we didn't want our competitors
Yeah,
to know.
right. Yeah.
It's kind of a greenish army green military colored plastic, and we call it Duratron, and we really had it under our wraps for almost 5 years before our competitors finally were able to chemically break it down and find out what it was, you know, and we still use it to today.
It's interesting listening to you. I definitely hear of there's a need in the market. Let's develop something to fill that need. So you have a sunscreen product now,
Yeah.
the rescue equipment that uses all the technology that you've developed for the sailing industry. How do you go about as an organization and as a leader testing ideas?
Like say our boats, our Olympic class boats, which became like #1 in the world, that was developed very much because we let the Olympic type sailors, the top, come in and work at our plant. We've always had a very open plant to ideas and people. People could walk in and they could work on their boats, you know, right in our own plant. And I know it was inefficient at times and would get in the way, but usually we'd pull their boat offline and they could go and do what they wanted to the boat. Not to the glass work in the main boat, but everything else, screw on their fittings and so on. They even got involved sometimes in the glass work and so on, to strengthen up this part or lighten up here and so on. So we kept a very open mind with them all. Many of the famous sailors of today went through that process at our plant. And so we learned from that, and that's how these things got developed. Our philosophy was, let's always try to build something better than anybody else and be first in the business. So we kind of always aimed for that. And we kind of said within ourselves, there's a lot of people out there, people want to be with the #1 product. Back then, we could take much greater chances. Olaf and I, many times if something didn't work out, it was costly, you know, because we were the owners, we could take the hit ourselves, which we always did. Mm-hmm. We made sure the employees were always paid and going off, and the ups and downs would be filled in by us. Mm. And just as long as we get to eat something and drink something, we're okay, you know. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of gone along that route all the time.
So in our business, when we do leadership workshops, we talk a lot about shared language and vision. As you grew, when it grew beyond you and Olaf and your core team, how do you communicate your vision and your values to your people?
I think they grew up with it with us. Because the guys that are managing the company today, which, we sold it to our employees, they've all been with us, at least 10, 15 years, and maybe some of them longer. And so they grew with the culture. And that's why we didn't sell out to a PE firm or an outside buyer, actually, because if he hadn't grown with the culture, and then things always go well if you're bought by a private equity firm or an outside buyer, so on. As long as things are going well, everybody's happy and everything goes. But when the crap hits the fan, in a recession or a COVID or something like that, then who's going to take the big hit? And usually in these firms, they don't take the hit. The bosses don't take it. They might take some, but the employees in many cases take the hit. And that really bothered us, I wanted them to say, our philosophy, we're going to take the hit. Your employees will be left alone, unless it's a total disaster.
What's the key to developing a good culture?
I think you got to live it yourself, and you got to show it out in the plant. You got to walk the talk, I call it. You got to go out on the floor and walk and talk with the guys, talk their language, so they can see that you're just like them and you're really interested in what they're doing.
We talk a lot about getting below the waterline in people's lives, that leaders need to really care what's going on in the hearts and minds of people that work for them. How do you encourage your managers to do that?
I think it's very much that they're watching you and how you behave, and then they might like that kind of behavior, but maybe because they're hired and they're in a plant, they don't know whether they should be wearing a tie and a white shirt and a suit or whatever, versus like this, shorts and stuff. And so I think you have to set the example, and they'll come on as they like it, And so by doing the walk the talk, I call it, and seeing that the guys really like that, the people in the plant really understand that you are truly interested in what they are doing. I think that's very important. Companies that are run where the bosses are always up in their offices and don't come down to the plant and see where the dirt's being made and so on, I think is a problem. I think the bosses have got to take the time to do this. I know it takes time, but I think it's really important that they do this. I mean, I'm not, right now I'm just a chairman or, handshaker and stuff like that, the plant. I don't really have my fingers on the day-to-day job anymore. And I truly try and stay out of their way, because they are doing a great job. And I think they're doing it better than I did.
It seems that a lot of time and effort had to go into building trust within the leadership team that they were going to carry out your vision, and that getting around and walking that talk.
I think it's important that you don't appear greedy, My car is a 2012, and I'm not ostentatious with stuff, I got this house now and so on. But before that, we did, all during that time. And Olaf and I lived pretty damn frugal, the time, and they knew that. So I think that helped build their trust, that we weren't spending company money on frivolous stuff. I bought my own boats, my own pay. And sometimes when it was a company boat or something, the company would contribute into it at the time. But basically, all of our personal belongings and everything, we paid for ourselves out of our own salary. And our salaries were always lower than what the rest of the industry was doing. And they knew that too. And they knew that we always took the first hit when things went wrong. And I think that built up a lot of trust in them, that we were not taking advantage of the company's bank account or anything like that. They knew that we didn't cheat on any of that stuff. We always flew economy. We stayed in the cheapest hotels and motels and stuff like that. So, and I think that's what builds it up, is that if they see the bosses living a high life, or going on sales trip and going first class, and expensive hotels, yeah, then I think you're building a problem, and yet they're losing trust in you.
What lessons did you learn out on the water, sailing, that applied to your business?
Teamwork, I think it was really it. And that even though you're the skipper of the boat, or maybe even own it, but that you were actually a regular guy on the boat with all the rest of them. You know, you had your job to do, they had their jobs to do, and but you weren't a Captain Bligh or one of those type of guys. And I think as long as we saw that while we were sailing and being on a boat, and you usually see that in the best skippers too. That's how they create a really good working team around them. And I think you have to do the same in a company. If you start separating yourself and you're a Captain Bligh and you're higher than the rest, and you have this attitude, well, just do what I tell you to do. Okay, it may work or it may not out on the boat, but I've never found it to really work well. And in fact, sailboats I've sailed with a lot, skippers and stuff that yell and get like that, I just won't sail with anymore, because they do limit themselves for sure. And again, I think it's the trust is built is how you live it yourself, and they'll follow along. You know, if it's in the right direction, what they feel.
You know, one of the things that's always impressed me as I read your book and I've heard your story before, you seem to have this commitment to learning and growing more each day. What are you learning today that's impacting the company, or how you're directing?
I am still interested in seeing what they're going to develop next, or what's the next, not the next big thing, but maybe the big improvement in something. In sailing, it's not really how to build a better block or so on. A lot of times, new innovation or new things come about because of new materials that are out there that you didn't have in the past. Like the Torlon plastic for big boat blocks. Didn't have that in the past before that. And especially it would be lighter and faster, so on. You know, we were scratching our heads on that. But then along came Delrin or nylon with fiberglass type hairs, 12 millimeter hairs, that were injected right into the plastic. But for some magic, they would align themselves perfectly according to where the load was going to be. And when we discovered that, we were able to make our blocks, our black small boat blocks, with this stuff without a stainless side strap. And that again was a new material that came around, or a new process that came around. That's kind of what's going on today too. Even in our industrial area, we're looking for materials and stuff that'll do the same job as maybe a stainless steel or titanium was doing, and maybe a thermoplastic of some sort. So we'll try it out and we'll see. One of the problems we face a bit in the industrial area is it has to be CE approved. The European and U.S. standards for strength. As soon as a human life is involved in your piece of equipment, there's much stricter standards on it. The safety loads and stuff go way up, 10 to 12 times your brake strength, so on. So that's kind of a different ball game. So we have to be much more careful there because it will get thoroughly tested out, and it has to meet these specs.
That spirit of just always improving and always making the culture better, and taking care of your people is what I'm taking away as such a powerful lesson. That you get good people and you set them free.
I think the people, they also like making high quality stuff and being number one in the game. So they take that home with them, and they're proud of it. So I think that's an important feature. You gotta make your people feel like that they're making a top quality product and that they're at the very top of the game.
How do you make sure someone fits in the culture when in the hiring process? How do you determine fit?
We don't spoon feed anybody, we teach them. We teach them and stuff like that, and we'll give them breaks, if they screw up here and there, or they don't have the right attitude, or they're not following the company culture and stuff like that. We'll work with them to try and change that. But if they don't, if it persists, then they go. Because what happens is their fellow employees won't let them stay around, because they're the ones that get angry at this stuff before it gets to us.
Well, Peter, I want to thank you for your time. It's easy to see why you were just inducted into the Wisconsin Business Hall of Fame. You've created an amazing organization. You create amazing people, and it shows.
Well, I think we've been very lucky in that the type of people you can get here in the upper Midwest, especially in Wisconsin. And so we attribute very much our success to the people. I've always said a company's only asset is its people.
Well, thanks for your time again.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Appreciate all your blessings that you've given the world of sailing and the people of Wisconsin.